1 minute to go, Luckmeister. Then I'll be down on you like a buzzard on a gut wagon.
How did the cast of ALF really spend their final years? In the golden haze of 1980s television, few shows were as oddly comforting and weirdly unsettling as ALF. A foul-mouthed alien puppet crashing into the life of an average suburban family, tearing through couches, sarcasm, and the fourth wall. Behind the puppet's antics was a crew of flesh-and-blood actors whose lives, unlike the eternal reruns, were anything but sitcom perfect. For years, audiences laughed with Max Wright's weary-eyed Willie Tanner, adored little Benji Gregory's innocent grin, and rolled their eyes with the nosy neighbors Trevor and Raquel Ochmonek. But what the cameras didn't show was far darker. Divorce, addiction, mental health battles, bitter regrets, and tragically, early deaths. One cast member died in a parked car under the scorching Arizona sun. Another passed away alone, after years of avoiding the very show that made him famous. What really happened to the stars of ALF once the curtain fell? Who faded quietly into the shadows, and who never wanted to be remembered at all? These are not just actors from a quirky sitcom. These are cautionary tales of fame, loss, and the brutal truth behind the laugh track. Subscribe to our channel for the stories behind the smiles and the pain they never showed on camera. 1. Max Wright, Willie Tanner. Max Wright was never meant to be a sitcom star. Trained in theater, refined on the stage, he once stood beneath Broadway lights dreaming of Chekhov and Shakespeare. And yet, for millions of viewers around the world, he would forever be known as Willie Tanner, the anxious, awkward, soft-spoken patriarch forced to share his garage and his sanity with an alien puppet named ALF. Born in Detroit, Michigan, Max carried the soul of a serious actor. He appeared in acclaimed films like All That Jazz and The Shadow, and earned a Tony nomination for his work in Chekhov's Ivanov on Broadway. But the role that brought him fame also brought resentment. On set, he clashed with the creators, hated the grueling puppet-based filming schedule, and once admitted in an interview that he couldn't wait for it to end. Behind the camera, his personal life was just as complicated. He was married to Linda Ibarrando for over 50 years until her passing, and they had 2 children together. But in the early 2000s, Wright's name appeared in headlines not for theater or television, but for a series of run-ins with the law, including 2 DUI arrests, one involving a crash into mailboxes and a traffic sign. Despite the chaos, there was something hauntingly human about Max. In his later years, he withdrew from the spotlight, quietly battling cancer in New Jersey. When he passed away in 2019, it barely made headlines in America, but in Germany, where ALF had remained wildly popular, his death was front-page news. He may have loathed the role that defined his career, but for millions, Max Wright was the beating heart of ALF, the only sane man in a house overtaken by absurdity. And perhaps, deep down, he knew that even the most reluctant icons leave behind something immortal. 2. Benji Gregory, Brian Tanner. He was the wide-eyed little boy America fell in love with. The youngest member of the Tanner family, always cheerful, always curious, and always standing just behind that furry alien who stole every scene. But behind the scenes, Benji Gregory's life would unravel in ways no sitcom writer could have predicted. Born in Panorama City, California, Benji practically grew up on sound stages. His father, sister, and uncle were all actors. His grandmother was his agent. By the age of 5, he had already racked up credits on Fantasy Island, The A-Team, and The Twilight Zone. But it was ALF that turned him into a household name. As Brian Tanner, he charmed audiences for 4 seasons and then vanished. After the show ended, Benji slowly drifted out of the spotlight. Hollywood, which once welcomed him with open arms, grew silent. He took a few voice roles, appeared in some low-profile projects, and then walked away entirely. He enrolled in the Navy, became an aerographer's mate, and tried to build a new life in uniform. But the past, the pressure, and perhaps the unresolved weight of early fame never truly let go. His final years were quiet. Too quiet. On June 13th, 2024, he was found dead in his car in the parking lot of a bank in Peoria, Arizona. The summer heat had soared past 100 degrees. The cause was ruled heat stroke, complicated by underlying liver disease. He was alone. He was 46. No farewell tour. No final red carpet. Just a boy who once lit up the screen, quietly slipping away in the silence of a parked car. A cruel, tragic ending for a child actor who deserves so much more. And a chilling reminder. Hollywood doesn't always let its youngest stars grow old. 3. John LaMotta, Trevor Ochmanek. Every sitcom needs a nosy neighbor, and ALF had Trevor Ochmanek, the loud, oblivious, blue-collar guy next door who always showed up at the worst possible time. Played with gruff charm by John LaMotta, Trevor was the embodiment of sitcom comic relief. But the actor behind the role had a brutally different view of the character and the show. Born in Brooklyn, John LaMotta wasn't just another TV face. He had real roots in grit and discipline. A former amateur boxer and a nephew of boxing legend Jake LaMotta, the raging bull himself. But his experience on the set of ALF was anything but triumphant. Years later, when asked about the series, LaMotta didn't mince words. He called ALF a piece of shit, the worst work I ever did. That wasn't bitterness. That was honesty, raw and unapologetic. He resented the shallow scripts, the mechanical puppet work, and the thankless role he was stuck in for years. And perhaps, in some small way, he resented that the show's success never translated into lasting respect for the actors who made it work. Outside of ALF, LaMotta was a working actor with real range, from American Ninja to Vampire in Brooklyn, from Hill Street Blues to ER. He kept acting into the 2000s, even voicing characters in animation. But he never again found a role that stuck with audiences the way Trevor did, for better or worse. John LaMotta passed away quietly in Los Angeles in 2014. There was no tribute reel, no industry-wide mourning. But maybe that's exactly how he wanted it. A man who played the fool on camera but refused to pretend off it. Unfiltered, unapologetic, unforgettable. 4. Liz Sheridan, Raquel Ochmanek. She was the woman next door with a shrill voice, suspicious eyes, and a flair for drama. Always peeking through the blinds. Always one step away from discovering the alien in the garage. As Raquel Ochmanek, Liz Sheridan played the nosy neighbor with comedic precision. But behind the exaggerated mannerisms and big hair was a woman whose real life was far more captivating than any sitcom subplot. Long before ALF, Liz Sheridan had danced across stages and lounges in Puerto Rico, fallen in love with a jazz trumpeter, and even shared a passionate, whirlwind romance with James Dean. Yes, that James Dean. In her later years, she wrote about their relationship in a memoir titled Dizzy and Jimmy, painting a portrait of youth, fame, and heartbreak. In one haunting recollection, Dean once whispered to her in a cab, "You're a part of me, and I'm a part of you. I take you with me wherever I go." It was the last time she saw him. On ALF, Liz brought that lived experience to every scene, playing Raquel as more than just a caricature. You could sense the theater training, the emotional weight, the unspoken grief beneath the comedy. She later became even more iconic as Jerry Seinfeld's mother on Seinfeld, a role that introduced her to a new generation. But Liz was never just someone's mom. She was a survivor of showbiz, of loss, of love that never fully left her. When she passed away in New York City in 2022 at the age of 93, it was just days after Estelle Harris, another TV mom, had died. Two matriarchs of laughter, gone within the same breath. But Liz Sheridan left behind more than punchlines. She left a trail of memory, mystery, and a gentle reminder that even the loudest neighbor might be carrying the softest, saddest story of all. 5. Misha Mazuros, ALF Full Body. You never saw his face, but without him, ALF wouldn't have walked, run, or stood at all. in the rare, full-body shots of the alien. Beneath the layers of fur and latex stood a man who had spent his life defying expectations. Misha Mazuros, the smallest performer on the set, and perhaps the biggest soul. Born in Budapest, Hungary, Misha stood just under 3 feet tall, a height that often cast him into sideshow stereotypes. But he didn't just embrace the circus life, he conquered it. Before ALF, he was already a star in the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, billed as the smallest man in the world. He drank scotch, smoked giant cigars, and moved through life with a kind of unfiltered bravado that couldn't be hidden by costume. When Paul Fusco needed someone to fill Alf's suit for those rare physical scenes, walking across the room, climbing furniture, making mischief, there was only one man who could pull it off. Misha gave Alf weight, presence, a strange physicality that made the puppet feel real. And yet, like many background heroes of Hollywood, he was barely credited, barely remembered, and eventually forgotten. Outside of ALF, Misha took on a string of bizarre, cult classic roles, from grotesque creatures in horror comedies to an eerie butler in waxwork. He lived loud, laughed harder, and played characters that terrified or enchanted, but never blended in. In June of 2016, he slipped into a coma and never woke up. He was 76. His death didn't make front-page news. There were no retrospectives, no glowing tributes. But for those who knew the truth, that sometimes the strangest parts of a show are built by the most extraordinary people, Misha Mazuros was not a footnote. He was a legend hidden in fur. They made us laugh. Sometimes, they made us roll our eyes. But above all, they made us believe that somewhere in suburban America, an alien could crash through a garage and turn chaos into connection. ALF was never just a show about a puppet from Melmac. It was a strange, absurd, oddly human mirror reflecting everything we didn't want to admit about ourselves. Our disconnection, our distractions, our desire to belong. And the cast who brought it to life? They were just as flawed, just as fragile, just as beautifully broken as the characters they played. Max Wright tried to outrun the shadow of his reluctant fame. Benji Gregory grew up too fast, only to disappear far too soon. John LaMotta wore his bitterness like armor, while Liz Sheridan carried old love stories like sacred relics. And Misha Meszaros, hidden beneath fur and forgotten by credits, reminded us that giants sometimes come in the smallest forms. They're gone now, all of them, but their laughter echoes, not in laugh tracks, but in memory. Their lives, messy, tragic, luminous, deserve more than obituaries. They deserve to be remembered. So if these stories moved you, if you ever laughed with ALF, or found a little piece of yourself in the chaos of that strange little family, then stay with us. There are more stories to tell, more legends waiting in the shadows, and more truths behind the smile. Subscribe now and rediscover the lives behind the laughter.